Welcome back into the Lions 24/7 podcast. I am Tyler Donahue. We've got a bunch to bring you here midway through the final week already of April 2024. The NFL draft begins in about 30 hours or so. We're recording midday Wednesday here. Thursday evening, round 1 takes center stage. Friday, we've got rounds 2 and 3 to look forward to in the NFL draft, and then things close out with rounds 4 through 7 on Saturday afternoon. All the action occurring live in Detroit. We'll be following along here from Happy Valley because this could be the largest Penn State draft class this century. In fact, all of our full-time staffers believe that it will be. We all have 10 Nittany Lions being selected in this draft. The highest to this point under the Franklin era and this century is 8 guys being picked a couple of years ago. 10 would be the most since 1996 when 10 were also selected that year. Penn State basketball strikes again in the transfer portal. They bring in a former top 50 recruit who's considered a 4-star transfer prospect. We'll dive into that edition in a little bit later. Also take a look at where things are moving for Penn State football in the transfer portal with about a week left in this post-spring window. But first, let's bring in Mark Brennan, Tyler Calvaruso, my colleagues over at Lions247.com. Hey, hello, fellas. How we doing?
Doing awesome. I just had to run and close a window here because it was getting a little noisy outside. I thought I'd get some nice fresh air, so I'm like signaling to Tyler, Phil, while I run and close the window. So here we are. And listen, I never get to do these things with Calvaruso, so this is going to be good. As much as you two talk, I really don't have to do much at all on this one.
Yeah, sit back, relax, enjoy the conversation. We don't cross paths much. I think you guys have probably done maybe 1 or 2 podcasts together in the past. Normally, we try to bring Daniel Gallen in the fold for this one because we all made our predictions for Penn State's draft class. But as we referenced early last week on an episode, Mr. Gallen on a well-deserved vacation. Last I checked, he was at the Vatican checking in on the Pope. So he is off and far away from Penn State football land, but we're locked and loaded here on a Wednesday afternoon. And fellas, it's a fun exercise that we do on an annual basis. Tyler, you joined it a couple of years ago. Mark, we've been doing it together here for the last 6 draft classes or so, where we shoot our shot and maybe kind of throwing darts at the board, maybe some educated guesses in some regards, but ultimately we try to project which Penn State players will be selected in the NFL draft across those 7 rounds, which team will pick them, and the precise number of the pick that they will go. And every once in a while, we get one of these things on the money. There's point systems involved with this. And Mark, before we break down our pick-by-pick predictions, and we're going to go in the average order that we came up with for all 10 of these guys, work our way through it. But Mark, can you explain the competition end for this? Because I'm always needing a refresher on an annual basis anyways.
I need a refresher on an annual basis. So I actually have the rules written, and I've had them written for years, and I have to go back and just check them over, every single year. But it really isn't as complicated as I'm making it out to be. It's just like golf. And if you think of, where the guy goes as actual par, you're just penalized a point every spot you're off. So if you say a guy is going to go number 25 and he goes 15, that's plus 10 points. Just like in golf, positive numbers are not good. Conversely, if you say he's going to go 15 and he goes 25, still plus 10 points. So it's easier than going pluses and minuses. And then we have some bonuses in there for if you get the exact team, if you get the exact team at the exact pick, and if you get the exact pick but not the exact team. How does that come into play? If there's a trade. So say you have somebody going number 20 to whoever's number 20 this year, and that team trades and the player still goes there. That's how it works. So this was much easier in 2017 when Chris Godwin was the only guy drafted. Wasn't quite as complicated. And I didn't do these the last time that they had 10 guys drafted, which was that 1996 class with my good friend and our good friend Goon Keith Conlon. And the amazing thing about that class, that did not include Kajana Carter, who it would have otherwise, who was a top pick the previous season. So that previous season was unbelievable because they had 3 guys go into top 10 in Kajana Carter, Kyle Brady, and Kerry Collins. So we're getting into some pretty, lofty territory here with 10 guys going. It'll tie, as you said, it's the most this decade, but it will tie that 96 class for the most ever in the 7-round era, which
Yeah.
began in the early to mid 90s. I forget exactly when. So it's going to be fun.
Ton of good players have come through Penn State football facilities, moved on to the NFL. Almost 400 total picks out of the program. That's top 10 all-time in college football. But as Mark referenced, 10 would be the max number that they have achieved here in the era. We'll talk about how we think they're going to get to it. And as you referenced just there, only one player picked the last time they won the Big Ten championship, the following draft. Chris Godwin, third-round receiver. I think a lot of people see that the 10 draft picks and they see the lack of the college football playoff appearance, and they say, well, what's the lack of correlation there? Of course, Penn State with an opportunity to break through with a 12-team playoff upcoming. But before we focus on this current team, we'll have plenty of months to do that. Let's look back at some familiar names. And, Mark, we're going to begin with you because Olu Fashanu, the headliner of this class, he has been, since this time last year when we were kind of projecting what the 2024 class might look like. And he is right around that range we figured he would be in, top half of the first round. Not quite as frequently projected as a top 10 pick as he was maybe coming out immediately from the season. Joe Alt has kind of become that consensus number one player at the offensive tackle position, routinely getting picked kind of the 5 to 10 range when you look at these mocks. But you've got Olu in the top 10 when it's all said and done. Daniel has him at number 9 overall, which is the highest among all of us, going to the Chicago Bears, helping protect their number 1 pick. Caleb Williams is going to be coming off the board first in this draft out of USC. And you've got him going 1 pick later to the New York Jets, where they've also got a quarterback investment to protect in 2024.
Yeah, I feel bad for Olu because I think part of the reason he slipped just a little bit, and it's ridiculous to say we're saying he slipped, but he was projected, up in the top 5 at one point. And I think 2 things. Number one, the way that some of these quarterbacks have elevated their status is knocking people down a little bit. And then his inability to work out completely at the combine and then pro day. Give him a lot of credit for trying to grind it out at pro day. But that's why I went with the Jets because, I was there. The intern wasn't there at pro day. She had a class, I think, something to do, school or whatever that nonsense is. When Olu was working out a little bit, he wasn't going full speed, but he and Kaden Wallace were going through some footwork drills and whatnot. And the Jets were one of the teams that was real. They had multiple guys there, at least 2 guys there, really taking a hard look at him. And listen, I know a lot of people are going with the mock draft pick of a few picks later, which you guys did. But I just think the Jets bring in 2 33-year-old offensive tackles, both on short-term deals. To me, you have that investment in a quarterback who's going to be there. I don't know if he's going to outlive the contract performance-wise, outlive it his career-wise. Hopefully, God willing, he outlives it life-wise. But you have to invest in protecting him, and I think Olu is that kind of player. I think he's going to be a 10-year starter in the NFL. I also think with Olu, one thing, watch out for teams trading up. If he slips a little bit, somebody's going to trade up and grab him because I think he's that good of a talent.
Yeah, the word around NFL draft circles, and there's a lot of word coming out and a lot of buzz and a lot of curveballs this time of the process, but it has been that the offensive tackle class is considered a top-heavy bunch. Olu, Fashanu, part of that top upper echelon at the tackle position, and people do feel like there could be a run on this group before long in round 1 in terms of teams trading up, trying to make some moves. I've got him going number 14 to the New Orleans Saints. That's probably been the most popular NFL mock draft prediction I've seen of late. I think it makes sense because if he's there, the Saints really have a lot of reasons to snap him up and try to make him a franchise tackle for themselves from a personnel standpoint. And ultimately, I just look at this as Olu Fashanu probably getting taken later, maybe a bit of a bargain pick as much as it can be at 14 overall, because I do believe there'll be a run in the skill position, the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, and by result, I think the offensive line class goes a rung down that ladder on the draft board, and you see guys showing up, in the early teens. He's one of them, and as a result, would be the first Penn State offensive lineman selected in round 1 since 2007. So he snaps a pretty significant streak there. And Tyler, you and I thinking alike here. You've got him going to New Orleans as well. Anything else to add on Olu?
I think it'd be a great pick for the Saints because, I'm just going to be honest. Trevor Penning has not been good in New Orleans. They need some help at tackle. I think Olu would be a really good fit there. I went back and forth really between 13 and 14. I think there is a chance that he could go to the Raiders at 13. Predicting what the Raiders are going to do in the draft, I mean, good luck to anyone doing that. But I think New Orleans would be a really good spot for Olu, and the Saints would definitely benefit from getting him on their offensive line.
Once again, Daniel Gallen has the rosiest outlook when it comes to our next Penn State prospect, Chop Robinson, an edge rusher who spent 2 years here on campus after beginning his college career as a 5-star recruit at Maryland. Daniel's got him going number 19 overall to the Los Angeles Rams. And once again, Tyler Calvaruso and myself on the same train of thought here, number 26 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That's the Buccaneers squad that has lost some defensive stars from the roster that won the Super Bowl a few years back. They're in a little bit of a reinvention territory on defense. He's the kind of jolt that they could add up front, give them something, get after the quarterback. And what I'd be most excited from this, guys, would be getting to see Chop Robinson and Olu Fashanu go up against each other twice a year for the foreseeable future in that NFC South. Tyler, eventually I'll stop stealing your thunder or vice versa, and we'll have different picks. But anything on the Chop Robinson to Tampa Bay Buccaneers forecast that you put out?
Well, I had the misfortune of covering a large chunk of Todd Bowles' tenure as a Jets head coach. And one thing I learned covering him was if he has the chance to take a talented defensive player, namely a pass rusher, he's going to. And, with the Bucs moving on from a guy like Shaq Barrett, who did a lot of good things for them coming off the edge, but he's getting older. The money wasn't quite there. They had to put it in other places with all these guys that they had to re-sign this offseason. Chop Robinson's a guy who makes sense at defensive end for the Bucs. So I think, the Rams – that's interesting that Daniel had that, because I think that could be a spot for him. It might not necessarily be their biggest need, but that could definitely be a spot. I feel like it's either going to be the Bucs at 26 or the Cardinals at 27, because Arizona's another team that could use a really good pass rusher like Chop Robinson.
We got a plan B pick there as well from Calvaruso. We don't get a lot of those here on the pick. And Mark, you're rounding us out here. You've also got Chop landing in round 1. And by the way, if this happens, Olu Fashanu and Chop Robinson selected in the first round. It will be only the second time since 2003 where multiple Penn State players are picked in the first round together. It happened a few years back with Micah Parsons to the Dallas Cowboys, Odafe Owe to the Baltimore Ravens. And I bring up Owe here because, Mark, this is a guy who you look at where he's projected in the draft in these mocks, and you look at his stats from last season, and they don't exactly align the way you think they might. Chop Robinson, 7.5 tackles for loss, 4 total sacks. He missed most of the Ohio State game. He missed a couple other regular season games. He opted out of the bowl game. So let's remember that's a bit of an abbreviated schedule for him. But Odafe Owe was a first-round pick without a single sack to his credit the season before. Much of that was about the testing numbers, and those testing numbers are certainly going to be part of what carries the day for Chop Robinson if he does indeed land in round 1. Where do you have him going, Mark?
Yeah, a couple things by way of housekeeping. For the record, Daniel, I think he wanted to be on his best behavior before getting his audience with the Pope, because he has the 6 guys he has going the highest of all of us. I mean, the odds of that. So I think he was just like in a really good move before heading over there to genuflect or whatever he's doing with the Pope. And what was the other thing? Oh yeah, we don't know each other's picks. So that just happened. So, and I think that's important because you could obviously, pull the old Price is Right and, bet $1 or whatever it is to get to win this thing if you see them all. So we don't know the others' picks, but I have them slipping a little bit just because there has been some criticism about that lack of production, but not very far. And I think I have him slipping into a really good spot at number 29 with those Detroit Lions. I could just imagine pairing him with Hutchinson, who is still only 23 years old, which I'm like, wow. I mean, that doesn't seem like that guy's been in the league for like 6 years. He plays like he's been in the league for like 6 years. And you look at what Dan Campbell's done with that Detroit situation. I think that would be such a great fit for Chop to go there and just take care of business. They could have bookend defensive ends there for years to come with these two guys. Little different style. I think Hutchinson's a bigger guy. Chop may be more of a speed guy, but I think they would complement each other well, and I think it would be a good spot for him to land.
curious to see in rookie season, at least, whether Chop Robinson is a full-time defensive piece or if he's more of a specialist package deal when it's a pass rushing situation. But that would be a really compelling landing spot if he goes with the on the up and up Detroit Lions right now. When it comes to Adisa Isaac, he's someone who has been trending in the right direction really since that Achilles injury and his return from it in 2002. Put together a strong bounce back campaign in 2022 where you started to see flashes towards the end of it in the Rose Bowl, and then decides to come back for a fifth year on campus and ultimately putting together his most complete season to that point. Last year, probably the most consistent defender on what was a really elite defensive unit. Finished leading the team in tackles for loss and sacks. He tied for second in the Big Ten with those 7.5 sacks. And Tyler, you've got him coming off the board. We're all, let me double check on that. We all see him as a day 2 pick. In fact, we all see him as an early, really early first half of the day 2 pick. But some of us see earlier than others. Mark's got him right on the fringe. Tyler, you, myself, and Daniel all have him in round 2. Where do you see the fit for the Washington Commanders, pick 40 overall?
Kind of ties into what I was saying about the Bucs with, them trying to replace some pieces on the defensive line, specifically coming off the edge. It's even more so in Washington when they moved on from Montrez Sweat and they moved on from Chase Young. Shaka Toney's not there anymore coming back from the gambling suspension. They decided to part ways with him. So there is a path to playing time there for Adisa Isaac, and not just playing time, but I think to make a significant impact as a defensive end in that front for Dan Quinn. I think Washington might have a chance to get off to a strong start under Quinn. It's something that, historically he has done. If you look at his first year as the head coach of the Falcons, strong start. First year as DC of the Cowboys, strong start. And I think a guy like Isaac could help his defense really succeed in year 1 and for many more years to come after that. So, yeah, I like his chances of going within that top 10 range of the second round.
I've got him right there as well, pretty close to that range. 12th pick of round 2 to the Las Vegas Raiders. That's pick number 44 overall. Antonio Pierce, the head coach there, former linebacker in the NFL, guy who's going to be defensive minded. I could see him, if he has his way here, leaning a little defensive heavy, starting to build that unit in his image. And he talked about pairing up defensive ends and edge rushers. They've got a really good one at Max Crosby down in Las Vegas. So to be able to bring Adisa Isaac along under his wing a little bit, get opportunities opposite of him down there in Las Vegas, I think it would be a good fit for both parties involved. And if this happens, if what Tyler and I are forecasting as the top 50 overall pick, that's 3 Penn State players in the top 50 overall. That would be the second time in 3 years that has happened. And Penn State had not done that for an 18-year span until 2022. So another good trend for the Nittany Lions if that comes to fruition in this draft. Daniel has Adisa Isaac going pick 31 of round 2 to the San Francisco 49ers at 63 overall. And just a couple spots later, Mark's got Adisa Isaac as the first name to come off the board in round 3. Remember, rounds 2 and 3, both on Friday night. And you've got the Carolina Panthers selecting him, and you also believe that he's going to have some positional versatility with Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, they run a 3-4, so you're looking at him potentially being an outside linebacker, and I think we saw him, what he was able to do. If you look at his stats, he didn't have a bunch of pass breakups or anything at Penn State, but he was very comfortable dropping back into coverage, and I think he can be that sort of player in the NFL. You look at Carolina, they bring in Jadeveon Clowney. How much does he have left in the tank? I mean, he's obviously going to play a lot of football for them, but other than that, there's some question marks at defensive end. And one of the interesting things here, and it kind of goes into what Daniel said, they lost Yetur Gross-Matos to San Francisco. And, to me, Yetur was more of a, 6'6", 6'7", 270. I don't know that he was a great fit for that kind of 3-4, just as big as he was. And I think Adisa might be actually a better fit than not might. He is a better fit in that style of defense. So look forward to seeing him wherever he goes doing well. But again, I think this would be with him. I was looking for a spot that I think a team that really needs a defensive end where he can make a relatively early impact. And I think this would be kind of an ideal situation for him, even though it slips into the first pick of the 3rd round.
All right. So a few linemen, as you mentioned, maybe some room to maneuver beyond the line for Adisa Isaac in an NFL scheme. But moving on from there, we've got our first skill player for Penn State coming off the board, the consensus number 4 member of this class by our projections, and that's tight end Theo Johnson. As you referenced, Mark, Daniel Gallen ahead of a lot of us on a lot of these guys. He's got Theo going to the Philadelphia Eagles, joining Dallas Goedert in that tight end room at 53rd overall. That would be the second round. That would be pick number 21 of the second round. Now, Daniel's alone here in picking Theo Johnson to end up in round 2. If that does happen, he would be the 4th straight Penn State starting tight end to end up in round 2 as a draft prospect, following Mike Gesicki, Pat Freiermuth, and Brenton Strange. So if Daniel's right, he's going to help himself out in this contest. We're all a little bit further down. I'm next. I've got him going 16 picks later with pick 5 of the 3rd round to the Los Angeles Chargers. I remember when Jim Harbaugh was pursuing Theo Johnson as a finalist, and Michigan was trying to get him to cross the river and come on down from Ontario and join the Michigan Wolverines football program. Ultimately picked Penn State. Harbaugh got to see him as an opponent for the last 4 years. And I think now as he sets up shop out in Los Angeles, I think that Theo Johnson is a fit. I do expect them to do a lot in the trenches for this draft out there for Harbaugh. But I think when you look around their roster, they got a couple veteran pieces at tight end, but no one who really jumps off the page as a dynamic weapon. And I think that Theo Johnson could be someone who, after they had to jettison a couple top pass targets for Justin Herbert due to salary cap issues, he come in. He could be a guy who's a big red zone target, a big body kind of safety net, intermediate pass target for Herbert, and someone that can get the job done as a blocker and will continue to grow in that department. So I think Jim Harbaugh and Theo Johnson, 5-6 years later after his recruitment, reunite in the NFL. And then next up is Mark, who you've got him going to the Washington Commanders a bit later, 9 picks after I do, number 78 overall in round 3.
Yeah, I think he's a second-round talent, but as you look at team needs, there may only be 2 tight ends that go in the first 2 rounds. So I don't think if he doesn't go in that second round, I don't think it's necessarily a reflection of him. It's just what the team needs are. And I look at the Commanders, they bring in a guy like Zach Ertz. They're trying to milk one more season out of him. And he looks like he's been running on fumes for a few years now. So, worst case scenario, he goes in there and he's not an immediate starter. He's able to learn from a consummate pro. I mean, I'm saying Ertz doesn't have a lot left in the tank, but I don't think anybody has anything but respect for the way he's carried himself in the NFL. And he was a very good player for a very long time. I think Bed's case, you're looking at a guy who has the size and speed and power, to be an immediate impact player at tight end in the NFL. So I think that would be a great situation for him to fall into.
And then, Tyler, you've got him going to the Cincinnati Bengals, pick number 80 in round 3. So just 2 after Mark.
Yeah, I feel like Cincinnati could kind of be the land of opportunity here for Theo Johnson, because really, if you look at that tight end depth chart, the only name that really stands out is former Nittany Lions star Mike Gesicki. And it's been a little bit since, he's 2 years removed now, I believe, from that 70-catch season that he had in Miami. And, he's not getting any younger. So I feel like that could be a comfortable landing spot for Johnson to walk into a tight end room where he could really seize things right off the bat. And I'll tell you what, if he could be part of that offense, that'd be a really dynamic unit in terms of the athleticism that they have on board in Cincinnati. T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, just Joe Burrow throwing those guys the ball. I think Theo Johnson would be another quality target for him.
Yeah, Theo Johnson, a guy not surprised any of us if he does land in round 2. It doesn't seem to be the tight ends being dispersed when you see the projection. Doesn't seem to be a lot of those guys going early, as Mark referenced. Maybe Theo Johnson goes a little higher than the 3 of us are projecting, and more what Daniel Gallen has in mind, and continues that streak for Penn State at tight end. He had 7 touchdowns after the bye week last season, really helped his case, scored the last one of those early in the Peach Bowl. Let's get back to the offensive line. The 5th pick on our board here is Kaden Wallace, a guy who started for 4 years at right tackle. For a while was right under that microscope along with some of the other offensive linemen for why can't this work? Why isn't this working? And by the time he finished his career, he was a steadfast contributor and a guy that was really reliable during that 5th season on campus last year. Tyler, you've got him first off the board among our foursome here, 99th overall to the Los Angeles Rams. That's at the end of round 3. And if that is the result, that would represent a really remarkable climb for Kaden Wallace. No one here in Happy Valley thought he was going to be a day 2 pick this time last year.
Yeah, I think when you look at the Rams and the way they historically like to build things on offense, getting a tackle who can give them some really good run and be durable, that's been a point of emphasis. And, Kaden Wallace has that veteran experience to come in and, really impact that depth chart in a positive way. The only thing that made me a little bit hesitant on this pick, and it didn't really even have anything to do with Wallace, was, maybe the Rams address it a little bit earlier and Wallace goes off the board elsewhere a little bit further down. But, man, I told you guys, I did multiple 7-round mocks. I was all in on this. So I had him going to the Rams, and I'm feeling good about that pick. With all the work I put in, it better work out for me.
Let the record show that Tyler Calvaruso put in far more work on this
really
than
well
any
when
of
I
us.
finished dead last.
Yeah, if you finish last again, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I know.
Finished last
that
year.
Happens.
I guess we should mention Daniel Gallen took it last year. Took the top honors in our draft projection. I mean, this is kind of crazy. Again, we all pick these. We all submit these projections separately, but we all have Kaden Wallace lined up within a 9-pick range here. Which, I mean, this is a guy who has significant range, and you think about where he could go in the draft. I've got him going 4 picks into round 4. Tyler, you've got him at the very end of round 3. Daniel Gallen has him 1 pick after I do, 5 picks into round 4 to the Los Angeles Chargers. And we'll hear from Mark in just a moment, but I've got him at 104 to the Arizona Cardinals. I know he spent a lot of time this offseason training in Arizona for the draft. He can get a little more comfortable out there in the desert, becoming a Cardinal. I think right now what's really helped his case is not just his history as a starter at a program like Penn State, but what he's done since the Peach Bowl. He's gone out there, and at the Shrine Bowl, he was asked to practice at left tackle. NFL coaches wanted to see him competing on that side. And then because of some personnel things that happen, they lose a guard from the lineup. He ends up last second starting at right guard in the Shrine Bowl alongside Hunter Nourad, his former teammate who was at center. And the feedback from that has been great. So I think Kaden Wallace's ability to go out there, test well at the combine, and then go and show some positional versatility, which I know is an aspect of his profile that a lot of Penn State fans were hoping to see more of at different points of his career. Could he slide inside, become a presence on the interior? We're talking about a former top 100 overall recruit here. He comes out the other side, ends up being one of the first names off the board on day 3 in my projections to the Arizona Cardinals. As I said, Daniel Gallen has him going 1 pick later. And then, Mark, you round us out. 7th pick of round 4 to the New York Giants.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier about the Jets taking a hard look at the offensive lineman at Penn State's pro day, and the other team that was right there standing behind this guy with multiple scouts, at least 2, were the Giants. And I think if you look at where the Giants pick, it's right now it's at number 6 and number 47, barring trades. I don't think Olu is going to go before the top 6, and I don't think he's going to fall to 47. So I think the reason they were there taking such a hard look was because of a guy like Kaden Wallace. So, hey, New Jersey kid, part of that is him being able to play in his home state. But I think you also look at what a mess that offensive line has been. They've tried to address the interior there, adding John Runyon Jr. and another free agent. But again, the positional versatility, I think he can come in and play all 4 spots other than center. And in the NFL, when they only carry maybe 8 offensive linemen on the active roster for a game, he's the kind of player who could go in and do a lot of different things for you. So I like that fit for him.
And for a guy who played his high school ball in Princeton, New Jersey, ending up in the Meadowlands for his first professional football home would be a pretty cool outcome. So there's the outlook for Kaden Wallace. Again, a lot different than where it might have been going into the 2023 season. You can say the same, but on the opposite end of the spectrum for our next name here, Kalen King at cornerback. There was a time when we figured him and Olu Fashanu would be kind of jockeying to be the face of this draft class, to be the first name off the board. Instead, the projection from all of us is that he falls outside of the top 99 picks. And Daniel Gallen has him going number 100 overall with one of the last picks of round 3 on day 2 to lead all of us. I'm next. I'm sorry, Tyler Calvaruso is actually next. 115 overall, which is the 15th pick of round 4 to the Cincinnati Bengals. And Mark, you've got him at pick 19 overall in round 4 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'll toss this one to you, Mark, because you've both got him right there in a cluster going to the AFC North. I think we're all going to hope that those of us who covered him closely, we hope that Kalen King gets his shot at kind of redemption with this rookie contract, because he told me at Pro Day that his focus is now firmly on that second contract and doing everything in his power to get the biggest one possible. He's not hung up on what he seemed to be hung up on this time last year, which is being a first-round pick. How do you kind of assess where it's gone for Kalen King since last November, as we're now about to find out his destination?
Yeah, we had somebody on the board mention, would it have been a good idea for him to come back for another year? And I honestly don't think it would have. I respect the question and understand the question. But I think, and you remember this, Tyler, was it at the Thon event? Not
Last
this
February.
year. I mean, he all but said that he was going to go out. I mean, he didn't go on the record and say it, but you could easily read into
it. I'll say, I believe he said Joey Porter's going to become the first round pick at defensive back from Penn State, which he missed by one pick because there was only 31 selections last year in the draft. Porter's the first guy off round 2. And then he followed that by saying, and then I'm going to go round 1 next year. And so it all seemed, and certainly the stage seemed to be set up for him, and everything you heard from within team facilities and everything you heard from the NFL draft industry. He wasn't talking crazy.
No, and that's but my overall point is that I think he was so focused in on this, and then you see all of the high draft projections coming out before the season, and then he doesn't quite have the season he hoped to. But I think his mindset was aggressive the whole time. This is going to be my final year, however it played out, and I wish him nothing but the best. But I don't know that coming back was going to help, because I think he was just so wired on doing this, and I'm not saying that was a negative for him. Because we talked to him. He's been nothing but a stand-up guy, and, showed up for the bowl, even though he ended up not playing. He was a good teammate, all of those things. I really believe, and, my pick of the Steelers was in part because they picked Joey Porter last year, who was supposed to be a first-round pick, and, kind of just, having some fun with it. But I also think he legitimately is the kind of guy that when he gets on a roster, he's going to find a way to stick. He carried himself like a pro here at Penn State, and I think he's going to do that at the next level, and I think he has enough talent to be in the league for a long time. So wherever he gets in, it didn't happen the way he wanted to, but I think he's taken the proper mindset, and I think he's going to make it work for himself.
It's been a strange journey, and I've got him the lowest out of all 4 of us. I've got him in round 5, pick 7, 142 overall. You look at Pro Football Focus's rankings for him, and it puts him in kind of the 6th round range. I don't know where he's going to end up, and I think there's a real possibility that there's multiple franchises out there that say, we know what the testing numbers are, but we really love what we saw from that sophomore film. We liked a lot of what we saw from his junior year, and we think that we can come out with a bargain here if we can get him in round 5 or round 6 or round 4 or even a round 3 kind of situation.
Doesn't that sound like the Steelers possibly, though? Because we've seen them do that.
Yeah, and I've got him going to one of the NFL's most broken rosters right now in the Carolina Panthers, and he'll have an opportunity to play a lot, become an important piece there. And I'll just say this, although I have him going round 5 and going further down the board than anybody else on this conversation, I think he's going to emerge as a starter in the NFL. I think when we kind of check back in on his progress come year 3, he's going to be in a much better spot than kind of what people were forecasting during the NFL Combine out in Indianapolis. People saying that he wasn't going to have a chance to stick in the league. There's somewhere in between, right? There's somewhere in between of him being the best cornerback in the draft, and now people saying, well, he's making a total mistake. He's not going to last. He's going to get washed out in the NFL. And I tend to veer towards the positive end with Kalen King because of what we've seen from him, what we know about him. And so round 5, but I think it's ultimately going to be a really good pick for the Carolina Panthers down the road here. We got a few more names to get to. One more on the offensive line, Hunter Nourad. We'll make 3 picks on the offensive front. That's a nice feather in the cap of Phil Trautwein as offensive line coach here for the Nittany Lions. And Nourad's a guy who was an Ivy League tackle at Columbia, played left guard for this team in 2022 after Landon Tengwall retires. And then in 2023, we see him step up as the starting center. Daniel Gallen, stop me if you heard this before, he has him first among us, round 4, pick 19 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. So that's 119th overall. I'm next. I've got him going 132nd overall in round 4 to the San Francisco 49ers. And then 1 pick later, Tyler Calvaruso, let you chime in on this. Buffalo Bills scoop him up in your perspective. Again, we're all around the same board. Mark, you're a little down the board at 175 in round 5 to the New Orleans Saints. But Tyler, what do you see about Hunter Nourad that has him as a round 4 guy in your opinion?
I think that, well, the first thing that jumps off the page for me is, the football IQ that he plays with as a center, and we all know how important that is. He just has that ability to lead a unit and lead an offensive line. I think that's going to be something that really works in his favor at the next level. When it comes to this specific fit with the Bills, I think he plays with the kind of toughness that Buffalo preaches out of its offensive linemen. Those interior guys that they have out there are nasty, and Nourad fits that description. So I just think his rise has been pretty incredible, because I remember when he came over to Penn State, I wasn't quite sure what he was going to be in terms of pro prospect, coming over from the Ivy League, jumping up to the Big Ten. What are you going to get? But he proved himself and then some. And now we're talking about a legit mid-round prospect, in my opinion. So it's been a fun climb to watch. And I think round 4 is a pretty comfortable spot here for Nourad.
And I think because of his history and because of some of his success in other spots, he's a guy. I've got the 49ers taking him in round 4. The 49ers have a center in year 2 of a 4-year contract, but he's somebody who can be your next center up and also push to play at guard. I think, you open up the conversation to all 3 interior spots. And Mark, what's interesting about his process, and Hunter Nourad, I would say, has kind of come through the draft buildup maybe in a better spot on a lot of the projections than we anticipated, as a kind of solidly in the middle of the draft. And this is despite the fact that he couldn't participate at Pro Day. He was limited during the scouting combine. I don't know if he was able to participate at all at the scouting combine at all. And that's because of some medical issues that he was dealing with. But you've got him going round 5, pick 40, 175th overall to the New Orleans Saints. So that is, a bit of a range there. It's about 60 behind where Daniel had him pegged. What makes you think he's an end of round 5 more than a top of round 4 situation?
I just think the fact that he wasn't able to do much at the combine, and then that he couldn't do anything at Pro Day, for a player like Hunter, I think it would have really helped him. Obviously, as Tyler said, high IQ guy, went to the Ivy League and did fairly well there. But and that's really it. And then I also think one thing with Hunter is, while he played tackle at Cornell, I don't think he's the kind of guy who can play tackle in the NFL. I just don't think he's quite long enough. I don't think he has that kind of length. So, to say he's limited to those interior 3 spots, maybe a little bit tough, or unfair, but I think those things could cause him to slip just a little bit. But listen, I think, you have a guy who did whatever Penn State needed him to do. He played guard, and then he made a smooth transition to center, which is not an easy thing to do. And the fact that he was able to do that, I think somebody's going to take a good look at him. And for me, it's the Saints.
The IQ, mental aptitude, obviously a huge part of playing center. He was also recognized by a lot of his peers on this Penn State roster as one of the toughest dudes on this 2023 roster. So a nice combination for a guy who had 2 years here on campus after starting his career elsewhere. Next up on our board, we've got 3 names left. We told you this is a big draft class. This is number 8, and it's linebacker Curtis Jacobs. A guy that, for as much of a range where he could land, we all see him standing in round 5. I've got him with pick 19 in round 5, and Mark's last with pick 37 in round 5. So it's a 5th round projection for Curtis Jacobs from all 4 of us. I'm leading the pack there. It's heading to the Los Angeles Rams. I know that he is one of the more easy to like players that we've interacted with at Penn State, at least since I came to the beat in 2017. I think that undoubtedly was going to carry over well in his interactions with coaching staffs and scouts along this pre-draft process. Just a guy who's going to be really open and honest when discussing himself. So I think that's kind of a natural ability for him, was to go in and have some of those tougher conversations that maybe other players aren't equipped with. And then on the field, he proved it as a special teamer, came in as a 5-star, earned role on special teams coverage units before he really stepped up and became a 3-year starter at linebacker. I think his NFL path is similar, fellas. I think he goes out, in this case, to the Rams and really builds his foundation on an NFL roster as a guy who's going to be able to contribute on special teams, be a quality backup, a versatile backup at linebacker. He played a few different roles here at Penn State, and then ultimately maybe be able to press his way into a starting lineup on a defense down the road. But that's my round 5 spiel, and I got to let you have a word on this one, Mark Brennan, because the big dog relationship goes way back between the two of you.
Yeah, so for people who don't know, it was the Outback Bowl, right? And we were doing interviews on the field after one of the practices, and I didn't even realize he did it, and he called me Big Dog, and that's why I don't know how much we've joked about that on the podcast, but um, I went into the media room that night in the hospitality suite, and everybody's like, Big Dog, Big Dog. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? You didn't hear Curtis Jacobs call you Big Dog? So I think it was just something that he said, like, hey, big guy or whatever. But listen, I really like Curtis Jacobs. I'm like you. I got to tell you, this was a guy that after the Rose Bowl on the field celebrating, and I think I can tell this story. I don't know if I've told it before, but as a team celebrating, he comes over and he said, I want to thank you for all the coverage. I want to thank you for coming out here. The team's celebrating on the field after the Rose Bowl. And then there was one game, I forget which road game it was. I was down on the field before the game, and he walked by me, and then they end up winning. It was at Auburn, and he comes over after the game and said, "Hey, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that I saw you before the game. I apologize for not stopping and saying hello." So when we talk about this, guys being nice guys, and that's why I have him going to my beloved Philadelphia Eagles, because we know how bad their linebacker play was. They tried to address it in free agency. We'll see how that goes. But I agree with you, Tyler. This is a guy who is going to be a good backup linebacker and a core special teams guy, and just a good guy and I know that doesn't come into play as much in the NFL, but I think that just adds to everything that he brings. Just kind of the way he carries himself. You could tell this guy's had a good family and, just carried himself like a pro and a gentleman and all these things. And I really want him for my Philadelphia Eagles. We could be fans now. I'm a fan of Curtis Jacobs now, and I want him on my beloved Philadelphia Eagles.
Bit of a Curtis Jacobs appreciation moment there on the podcast, but Mark has him going 172 overall. Cal Russo has him going 169 overall to the Green Bay Packers. Daniel Gallen sends him to the Kansas City Chiefs at 159. And as I said, at 154, I've got him going to the Rams. Tyler, you are first for our next name, and he's number 9 off the board for Penn State here. Johnny Dixon, a guy that I thought we'd be discussing much earlier in this type of discussion, looking at it last October or even last November. As it turns out, you're highest on him late in the 5th round to the Miami Dolphins. What do you make of Mr. Dixon?
I see him as a solid kind of reserve depth piece at the next level. I think he could be a guy who carves out a role for himself in the NFL for a pretty extended period of time. I think some of his best football is still ahead of him. And with the way I had it fall in my mock, he gets a chance to return home to Florida and go suit up for the Dolphins. I believe he's a Tampa kid, so he's going to get to reside in Miami now, for a team that has legitimate AFC title aspirations. So I think whether it's a 5th round or 6th round pick for Johnny Dixon, I do think that he has the skill set to be one of those depth defensive backs who, if you need him to start in a pinch, he could give you some quality reps on the outside.
I can't believe we're talking about this guy in the draft when we're talking about him. He was tremendously versatile here. He was a guy who progressed year by year. And in Manny Diaz's system, he was one of the more impactful players from start to finish, both of the last couple of seasons. In each instance, he led all FBS cornerbacks in sacks during those seasons. He's a guy who held it down in the perimeter, was able to rock some guys while playing closer to the box, getting into the backfield. Seemingly doomed, though, in recent months by his health situation. He was restricted to about a day or two of work at the Senior Bowl because of an injury, ends up not being able to participate at the scouting combine. He came into the building on crutches for Penn State's pro day. So you chalk that up. The fact that he wasn't here on campus in December, it's been a while since we've seen Johnny Dixon doing stuff in football, on a football field. So I don't know what that means. Not necessarily a good thing for his draft outlook, but round 6, pick 7 to New York Giants. And in my opinion, this is somebody who, if he's right and he's ready to roll mentally when he gets to his next destination, he could be. I think I said it about a couple other guys in this Penn State class, but he could be a real steal here because just what he was able to contribute at Penn State, it felt like he was just popping up in key moments. A guy that they absolutely loved and his development here in recent years. And I think if we had kind of had this conversation midway through the 2023 season, we probably would be saying that Johnny Dixon is at least a day 2 pick And here we are talking about round 6. And Mark, you've got him just a few picks after 188 overall. Pick 12 of round 6 to the Houston Texans, and just so Daniel's represented, he's got New England Patriots snagging him in round 6, pick 180. So Tyler has him at the back end of round 5. Me, Daniel, and Mark all have Dixon toward the top of round 6. And let's finish up with another cornerback, the third cornerback off the board that we're projecting for Penn State will be their 10th pick, which would tie the all-time high mark in the modern draft era, as Mark referenced earlier in the show. And Dayquon Hardy. Not just a cornerback, but a punt returner as well. Second team all-conference special teams returner last season and half a season's work at that spot. Daniel is on top here once again. Round 6, pick 16 to the Seattle Seahawks. That's 192 overall. Mark, you're next up. You've got him going to your beloved Dallas Cowboys at 216. Round 6, pick 40. And as you note in your commentary on the site, this has so much to do with what he showcased as a fifth-year senior.
Yeah, in fairness to Daniel the Pope Gallen, I had the lowest rating for 6 guys. This was one that he didn't have the lowest rating. I've been through enough of these to know that sometimes you follow these guys and maybe you think a little bit too highly of them. So we'll see how it plays out in the scoring. But I look at a Cowboys team, as difficult as it is for me to look at them, that finished last in the NFL in punt return yardage, 21st in kickoff return yardage. You look at the new kick return or the new kickoff rules, which I think are trying to encourage more returns. And I think it's important to have a good return man at this point, and would not be surprised if somebody spends a pick just for that reason. And then, you have the added benefit that I think he could do so many different things in your secondary and for your defense. This is a guy who was able to blitz. He played multiple different, areas of the field. So I know he's undersized, but you talk about another guy with a high football IQ. I think he could do so many things that he's going to be able to make an impact somewhere. Some people have him being an undrafted free agent, but I think the opportunity for him to do things on special teams, I think there's so much more value in that now that he's going to get a chance.
Yeah, and if he stood 5'11", he's off the board way before we're talking about it. And in that same train of thought, though, he's going to pick up a Penn State scholarship a lot earlier than within 48 hours of signing day, which Penn State staff kind of hemming and hawing about who he was going to be as a prospect, despite all the production at Penn Hills and what they saw in the state championship game. The measurements were a little hard to get past at 5'9", 155 as a high school senior. And we're talking about the same thing. I think whoever picks him is going to be, in hindsight, very glad that they made this move. And I've got him going round 7, pick 10 to the Minnesota Vikings. Going to get a chance to get the ball in his hands as a special teams returner, but let's not shortchange what he is about as a defensive player. There's going to be matchup issues at 5'9" in the NFL. That's just the way it is. The strength is going to be an issue in some situations, but I'm not just saying it's punt returner or nothing for Dayquon Hardy at the next level. I think he's got a shot to establish himself as a valuable defensive component, not necessarily the front end guy in the defensive backfield at the next level, but because of that history at the slot, because of his comfort level at the slot, which requires a high level of IQ at this position, I just think he's got a package that could keep him around an NFL roster, maybe a few NFL rosters for a while. And Tyler Calvaruso rounds us out, pick 29 of round 7 to the Detroit Lions. Daniel Gallen, as I said, has him going round 6. Just like Mark did toward the tail end of that round. And that's a wrap, guys. So not only do all 4 of us have 10 guys being picked out of Penn State, but 2 of us, Daniel and Mark, have 10 players being picked out of Penn State before the 7th round. So that would be a hell of a story, and we'll be writing and commenting on it at Lions247.com as the draft moves forward Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Hope you'll join that conversation. Check out our coverage. Let's finish by going over to you, Mr. Calvaruso, and breaking down Penn State basketball transfer portal pickup that surfaced today on a Wednesday. They added Tennessee transfer Freddie Dilione. He is a guy who was a top 50 recruit just 2 years ago. Took a red shirt as a mid-year enrollee at Tennessee a couple seasons ago. Played in about 17 games last season, averaged 5 minutes per contest, hit the portal earlier this month after appearing in 2 tournament games, and he is pickup number 4 for Mike Rhodes and company out of the transfer portal in this offseason.
Wasn't too long ago he was being mentioned as a potential first-round talent in some mock drafts, so I think that speaks to the upside here. for the staff. Look, this has been a pretty successful offseason for Penn State in the portal, in my opinion. I think Mike Rhodes and his staff have gone out and addressed really every need for the roster that it wanted to address. It wanted to add a stretch big who could help space the floor. It wanted to add that physical presence down low, and it wanted to get a guard who could, he could handle and he could play off the ball as well. And that's what Dilione is. His minutes at Tennessee were limited, but everyone I've talked to about him he just oozes potential as a scorer. Even more he's developed as a handler. His handle has improved. He's become more of a, true guard throughout his development. We can distribute a little bit when it's asked of him, but I think he's going to bring a much needed punch in the scoring department for Penn State. Penn State, when it got Dilione on campus for his multi-day visit here recently, had playing time in the backcourt to pitch. That went over well, and this one came together pretty quickly. But I said last week when Penn State got Eli Rice, I thought maybe that was my favorite get of portal season. I think this one is probably taking the cake for me now. I think there's just a ton of upside here for this Penn State staff to tap into. And if Dilione could perform anything like a former projected first-round pick and a top 50 recruit, Penn State has a real potential steal on its hands in the backcourt.
We talked about the addition of Rice to the transfer class last episode, in case you missed that. A wing from Nebraska who made the move after his freshman year. And with Dilione, just a couple of years ago, down in Raleigh, North Carolina at Word of God Christian Academy, he was one of 50 nationwide standouts on the USA Today Boys Basketball Player of the Year watch list. He broke out as a junior, 25.7 assists, 7 rebounds per game. I considered a bunch of schools: Alabama, Wake Forest, Virginia, VCU, where Mike Rhodes was the coach previously, before ultimately signing with Tennessee. Mark, a lot of upside here. They needed help in that backcourt. They get it. What do you make of this edition and ultimately the work that Penn State has put in with the transfer portal class, which is at 4 players right now, matching their 4-man high school recruiting class coming to campus for the 24-25 season?
Yeah, Tyler has touched on this, not in this podcast, but in previous podcasts and in previous things that he wrote. But, these aren't one-and-done players, hopefully, if you're Penn State. Yeah. But, 3 of them have 3 years left and 1 of them has 2 years left. So I also like the fact that you're looking at Rhodes being able to go and, we use the cliche, get a second bite of the apple with multiple of these players, guys who he recruited heavily at VCU, and they obviously liked him. But, it's a little bit different committing to VCU, with all due respect to VCU, which actually beat Penn State this year, but, as opposed to committing to a Big Ten team. And I think obviously he maintained positive relationships. And how much have we seen that with James Franklin going back for the second go-round, recruiting some of these players out of the portal? So I think those things really stand out. The other guy, Kachi, is it Enza, Tyler? Is that how you pronounce it?
I believe so.
Yeah, I mean,
I believe that's what it is.
Yeah, I would really look out for him, because I'm getting the sense that they are very high on this kid. He went out to Xavier, and they listed him as a center. They bulked him up to over 230 pounds. This is a kid who played outside of Philly under Ben Luber, a former Penn State point guard. Rhodes recruited him very hard, but they don't think he's that kind of player. They think he was out of position at Xavier under Sean Miller. They think he's more of a power forward who can bring an element of athleticism if he drops some weight. So the other thing we're seeing with all these guys that they recruit and that they bring in is length. I mean, just, long arms, 6'8" guards, 6'5" guards, a 7-foot center. We're seeing that, and we see how effective that's been for some of the kids they brought in last year out of the portal. Obviously, Ace is a little different. He's not the longest player in the world, but I think he gets things done in a little bit different way. But on a whole, you look at what they lost compared to what they gained, and I think they came out on the much better end of it, with all due respect to the players they lost.
According to the Penn State press release from his announced addition to the roster, it's Kachi Enze. is the pronunciation there. And then so him and fellow big man Yannick Niederhauser from Northern Illinois, and then the wing that we mentioned who came in from Nebraska, Eli Rice committing last week, and then you tack on the guard and Freddie Dilione, who's 6'5", 195-pound combo guard. So there's your transfer class right now. While we're on the subject, before we say goodbye to everybody, Tyler Calvaruso, what do you want to put out there regarding Penn State football's transfer portal endeavors right lately? I mean, quite frankly, it's been relatively quiet, not just here at Penn State football, but a little bit more across college football than we kind of figured for this spring window. We've got 6 days left that guys can place their name in there. So that means guys on the current Penn State roster and guys that Penn State might want to be interested in pursuing. Give us a quick kind of elevator pitch on what Penn State is doing right now in the portal.
Yeah, quick's probably the best way to describe it. You know, obviously the staff is continuing to explore pretty much every way it possibly can to upgrade its roster at multiple positions. But the fact of the matter remains there's really just not a whole lot out there right now. And I say it pretty often here, the staff's not just going to jump and take a guy for the sake of taking a guy. It's just not going to happen. You know, the fit has to be right on the field. The fit has to be right off the field. And if Penn State's going to make a real move on a guy in the portal, they're going to make sure he's someone who could come in and make an impact in 2024. Because this program wants to take that step forward and get to the college football playoff. They need impact guys. So they're not just going to bring in a guy who they don't think can truly help them get to that point. So like you said, 6 days. You know, spring ball is wrapping up across the nation. Exit meetings are still going on. So maybe a splash guy or two hits the portal from here on out. We're going to have to keep an eye on that. But we're monitoring pretty much everything we can with the portal right now. It's been slow, which, you know, I was actually looking forward to. Maybe some more activity, some more to report on, but we'll see what comes about in these coming days.
Yeah, still just a couple names as we record here that have entered from Penn State, both at the receiver spot, and Keandre Lambert-Smith and Malik Mega, fifth-year players on the roster. So as we said, that thing won't close until April 30th. So stay with us at Lions247.com as we continue to follow the latest with Penn State. And a lot of those conversations haven't been about who are you going to go bring in. It's how do we make sure that we're keeping the guys we like who are already here on campus? How do we make them feel valued in modern college football? That's been a big part of the process thus far here coming out of spring football. Guys, really appreciate the perspective. Always fun predicting the outcomes for the draft. Hopefully it goes well for all these guys. They go on to make a ton of money in the NFL, and we get to talk about them for a long while. By the way, guys like Keaton Ellis at defensive back, Alex Felkins at kicker, Trey Potts at running back. We're not predicting them to be drafted players, but hopefully their phones are busy come Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening when those free agency deals are offered to the undrafted rookies. So we will keep you informed on the NFL draft status for all these Penn State guys at Lions247.com. We've got recruiting and transfer portal updates coming your way at the site as well. On behalf of Mark and Tyler Calvaruso, I'm Tyler Donahue, wishing everyone well. Thanks as always for watching or listening to the Lions 24/7 podcast.